The semitone, or minor second interval, was deployed to devastating effect by John Williams in his score for Steven Spielberg's 1975 film Jaws. This segment of music is so culturally pervasive that music teachers invariably use the Jaws theme to teach students how to orally recognize the smallest interval available in the equal-tempered system, the half step. Williams's music was so viscerally frightening that it contributed in a big way to an ongoing irrational belief amongst human beings that sharks are seriously dangerous. They're not. A very, very small number of people die from shark attacks each year. Still, I wouldn't want to encounter one in the wild. But why is that music so viscerally terrifying? Is there something inherently scary about a semitone? I don't think that a movie has ever so fundamentally shaken me the way that Ari Aster's Hereditary did when I saw it in theaters in 2018. As I was watching it, I was menaced by the music. And only when the credits rolled did I learn that it was crafted by saxophonist and composer Colin Stetson. Long story short, Stetson knocked this one out of the park. It's almost as if his whole career had been building towards this collaboration with Aster, who was inspired by Stetson's solo albums while he was writing the script. For the soundtrack, Stetson basically just did what he's been working on for decades, conjuring unusual textures and timbres with his array of low woodwinds, and his unique catalog of extended techniques such as circular breathing, double tonguing, and singing while playing. He also didn't try to reinvent the wheel with his choice of musical interval. Singular interval. See, Stetson's score is basically just a whole bunch of minor seconds, with truly very few exceptions. So in this video, I'm going to analyze the ways in which Stetson's score works with the images and dialogue in Hereditary to scare the shit out of us. Along the way, we're going to check out some of the most legendary horror soundtracks of all time. Spoiler alert, they're all chock full of minor seconds. I'm also going to draw on wisdom from the grand zaddy of musical dissonance, Arnold Schoenberg, and tell you some stuff about the Overtone series. Basically, I'm going to attempt to describe what it is about the minor second interval that makes us want to soil our shorts. This is Score Study with me, briankrock.
Part 1. Satony.
I want you to think of the two most iconic horror scores of all time. Hold those thoughts in your head, and I will read your mind. You were thinking of Psycho and Halloween.
Oh my god, how do you do that?
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Okay, so after Jaws, there probably isn't more iconic scary music than the shower scene from Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. Let's dive in for a second to Bernard Hermann's perfect score. As the shower curtain opens, we hear high E flats intoned by the violins. They are down bowing every single note, and their dynamic is marked sforzando, and they're playing in the extreme high register of their instrument. Basically, everything in this music is extreme.
On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being not so extreme and 10 being extremely extreme, I give this a 9.5!
The next pitch to enter the picture is an E natural or F flat, a major seventh below our first E flat, which is the inversion of a minor second. Then below that, we have another E flat, and below that, another E. Then a new note is added into the mix, which is F natural, a half step higher than E. And then below that is added a G flat, a major seventh below F. Below that, an F natural, a half step below G flat, and so on and so forth. Basically, this chord is just a really wide cluster of half steps. And the minor seconds don't stop there. Next, we hear dissonant chords followed by low octaves. Hone in on those low octaves. First, we hear Fs, then Es, then F, then E. half steps. The next pitches are a tritone higher, B flat, then A. Again, half steps. Hermann probably thought to himself, this shit writes itself. John Carpenter didn't overthink it either when writing the score for his film Halloween. Because of his exceedingly low budget, he didn't have the money to hire a separate composer. Instead, he spent just 3 days in the studio improvising the score himself. Good lord, the inspiration gods were with him during those 3 short days. The main riff goes something like this. The lowest pitch F sharp creates rhythmic interest, while the sustained upper notes create a simple melody. C sharp, C sharp, C sharp, D, C sharp. Half steps. But then there's a jarring modulation because the entire riff is repeated transposed down a half step. C, 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 D flat. Here's the point. Minor seconds are considered one of the most dissonant intervals in our 12-note equal-tempered system because they are confusing, and this is a point that I'm going to go into more detail about later. A semitone destabilizes the music. Not only does it create an uncomfortable rub that is unfamiliar to most listeners' ears, it also undermines any semblance of functional harmony. Put another way, it creates questions rather than providing answers. Like tiptoeing tentatively through a haunted house, uncertain what awaits you around every corner, a half step makes you wonder what could be coming next. Where even am I? What is really scary about a shark attack, or being stabbed by an intruder, or being stalked on Halloween night, is being completely unmoored, unprepared, out of control. These films mirror the existential terror of just being a human being on planet Earth, and we derive a perverse catharsis from subjecting ourselves to this terror.
Part 2.
Hail Paemon. If you haven't seen Hereditary, I'm asking you to please turn this video off right now because I'm giving you every spoiler, and I would hate to rob you of the experience of finding this stuff out for yourself. The first musical gestures that we hear in the opening seconds of Ari Aster's feature film debut, Hereditary, encapsulate in a moment the auditory events that will unfold over the next 2 hours. After a short introductory cluster that's crammed with dissonances, we hear a low C intoned by Colin Stetson's contrabass clarinet. I mean, I assume it's a contra. The thing is that whoever mixed the audio did such a tremendously creative job with EQing and adding distortion and compression and different colors that it's often difficult to parse what you're hearing, which adds to Stetson's goal of furthering both general and specific feelings of dread, confusion, and unraveling. But this low C morphs ever so gradually into a low D flat, the half step above C. It's actually a gesture that is very reminiscent of Meshuggah's great song Bleed.
The whole fucking song, basically.
Above the low D flat, a middle C stubbornly refuses to move. An chord gradually fleshes out, spelling D flat major 7, before that low D flat again descends to a low C. C, D flat, C. A semitone. Then we hear a gesture that we will come to associate with the astral flashes that signify the Paemon demon's spirit. Honestly, I can't really hear this musical figure as anything other than a sort of abstraction of the Halloween theme. Like Carpenter's off-kilter 5/4 theme, Stetson plays an ostinato grouped in 7, which moves erratically between B and C, another half step. Instead of deriving rhythm from some lower pitch like the Halloween theme does, Stetson uses false fingerings on the saxophone. This technique was popularized in the 80s by saxophone god Michael Brecker, but Stetson does it differently. He uses unusual mic placements to get percussive sounds from the saxophone's keys, as well as hints of the lower fundamental tone. You know what? I'll just play an example. And there's probably a mic like somewhere right here and maybe right here, so you hear. Additionally, he circular breathes through these passages, which has two awesome effects. First of all, it creates a continuous blanket of sound that is somewhat reminiscent of like a synthesizer patch. But secondly, we hear the sound of his breath as he simultaneously inhales through his nose and expels air from his cheeks. And this breath creates a human sound that could simply never be achieved by a synthesizer. This is what circular breathing is. You basically collect air in your cheeks, then you close your throat, you push that air out from your cheeks while you breathe in through your nose. I'm making it sound a lot easier than it is, and I'm not even very good at it. Let's see if I can do it. Yeah, I'm not very good at it. Also, to be honest, I'm using a really hard setup that I doubt that Colin Stetson uses, but anyways. So after elegantly establishing the dichotomy between C and D flat, Stetson expounds on that idea throughout the rest of the film. After Ellen Lee's funeral, her daughter Annie consoles Ellen's granddaughter Charlie as she mourns in bed. Charlie knowingly says to her mom,
"She wanted me to be a boy."
Then we hear the mother's and daughter's theme, which features gorgeously aleatoric clarinets arpeggiating a D-flat major triad. But after Annie says,
"You never cried as a baby, even when you were born,"
a new note is introduced which destabilizes the whole affair. It is an A natural, which is the augmented fifth scale degree of D flat, and that A natural descends to a G sharp. Again, a minor second destabilizes the proceedings. So far in the movie, everything has been fairly earthly, but around 17 minutes into the film, the Graham family starts to experience things that are otherworldly. As Annie walks out of her studio one day, she notices an ethereal light shining in through the window of her deceased grandmother's bedroom. When she walks into the doorway, she sees that that light is shining down on a triangle which seems to be burnt or carved into the floor. The music that accompanies this moment feels odd. And that's because we're experiencing a microtonal interval, a quarter sharp B against a regular C sharp. This interval could be called an augmented minor second. It's an interval that's just slightly larger than a normal semitone. And it returns again during the second seance scene. As the Graham family tries to conjure Charlie's spirit, we hear a low B clashing against a C a quarter tone sharp.
That's enough.
What? No. Listen, when I did this earlier, this manifested on the page. I saw it.
Draw it some more. What is it?
It's Charlie. Did you finish, Charlie? Did you want to draw some more? You can keep going.
Stop it!
We need to keep our fingers touching.
You are scaring him.
No, I am not. Peter, listen.
Stop it!
Listen to me. There is no need to be scared. This is your sister.
I don't have time to show you all the ingenious ways that Stetson exploits minor seconds in his incredible score, but I'll show you a few more. So about a quarter of the way through the movie, Charlie is walking without her shoes in the backyard, as if she isn't in control of her own body, and she's carrying the severed head of a dead bird. At this moment, we hear some excruciatingly unstable music, and what it is, it's Stetson playing a high C while he sings the D flat higher than that. I'll get my saxophone again and show you what that sounds like. You can feel the intense effort that it's requiring for Stetson to perform this. In addition, that half step causes some unruly beating, which is intensified by adding distortion during post-production. But here's what it sounds like. I can't do it. I love the moment where Annie starts to realize what's actually happening in her house. And this is the spoiler of all spoilers. Basically, King Paemon, the god of mischief, had inhabited her grandmother's body and was looking for a suitable male vessel. And Paemon unintentionally inhabited Charlie's body and was unhappy, so he had to manufacture a situation for Charlie to die so that he could find his way into Peter's body. During this scene, we hear two chords, a distorted F major 7 with an F in the bass and an E, which is already a major 7th, which is the inversion of a minor 2nd. But that F moves down to an E7 sharp 9, and this E moves up to an F. So we have this sort of elegant I mean, what is more unstable than a semitone? Well, how about two semitones at once? F to E and E to F. And then what's great is this E7 resolves to an A minor with a major 7. Which creates yet another half step. Do I even have to go on at this point?
Part 3. Complete the ritual.
Well, actually, yes, I do. I need to show you just one more moment. In the final seconds of the movie, we hear Peter click his tongue the way that we had heard Charlie do so many times throughout the movie. At this moment, we know for certain Paemon has found his new vessel in Peter's body. Then the aleatoric D-flat major arpeggios from the Mothers and Daughters theme begins yet again. Notice how this D-flat major triad completes a structure that was set up so beautifully at the beginning of the movie. After 2 hours of hearing basically nothing but low C drones that have caused an unbearable amount of tension, the music has now found a final permanent home in the key of D flat, a semitone higher. But the uncomfortable sting of the semitone has not completely disappeared. The key of D flat has two semitones built in between the 3rd and 4th scale degree and between the 7th and 1st scale degree. So in music theory courses, people love to say that that 4th scale degree wants to resolve down to the 3rd scale degree, or that 7th scale degree wants to resolve up. In reality, tones don't want to do anything. We've just been conditioned over hundreds of years of Western music to expect that to happen. So Stetson exploits those intervals for all they are worth. First, we hear a C natural, the major 7th degree, clashing rebelliously in the lower register to create sort of this sound. There's that minor 9th interval there. But then, as Peter enters the treehouse, he looks up to see a brass statue with the magical emblem etched into its chest, and disturbingly, his little sister's severed head sitting atop it with a crown. It's at this moment that we hear a new theme that goes something like this. The 4th scale degree descends inexorably to the 3rd scale degree. It seems so obvious, but this moment feels monumental. After 2 hours of muddy chromaticism and extended instrumental techniques and caustic sound design, our ears now feast on pure, sparkling tonality for the very first time. It is as if the old world, in which Ellen, Annie, Steve, and Charlie are still alive, was nothing but an illusion. Now, King Paemon has found the true vessel, and with this ritual complete, he is locked forever in Peter's body.
Hail Paemon! Hail Paemon! Hail!
So, but Why have film composers, and before them, operatic composers, historically always reached for a semitone when they needed to express an emotion that was frightening? Well, to answer this question, I'm going to refer you to Arnold Schoenberg's theory of harmony. In case you don't know, Schoenberg was the man responsible for the 12-tone system that achieved something at least resembling hegemony during the 20th century. In his eyes, consonance and dissonance would become obsolete terms as human beings expanded their conception of what was considered euphonious. However, he was completely wrong about that. You stupid idiot. You fucking dumbass Schoenberg. No, I mean, an incredibly brilliant man and a exceedingly brilliant composer, but we still consider semitones to be dissonant. And the reason for this, ironically, is written right here in Schoenberg's treatise. In the overtone series, which is one of the most remarkable properties of the tone, there appear, after some stronger sounding overtones, a number of weaker sounding ones. Without a doubt, the former are more familiar to the ear, while the latter, hardly perceptible, are rather strange. So let me elucidate what Schoenberg is saying here. With C as the fundamental tone, C sharp is the 17th partial of the overtone series. In fact, it's the furthest away partial, excluding one other note, which oddly is E flat, the minor third. To observe the complexity of a semitone in another way, we could construct its frequency ratio. In general, ratios with lower integers in the numerator and denominator are going to sound more consonant. For example, an octave has a ratio of 2/1. A note that has a frequency of, say, 400 hertz, its octave will have a frequency of 800 hertz, so it's a very simple ratio. But in this case, the pitch C1 has a frequency of about 32.7 hertz. The semitone above C1, C sharp 1, has a frequency of 34.65 hertz. So its frequency ratio, simplified to whole numbers, is 3,465 over 3,270. These are huge integers, and thus this is an extremely complex ratio. So Schoenberg referred to the semitone as rather strange. And yes, in the final analysis, terror is just this, the unfamiliar. We are afraid of what lurks under the ocean's surface because it contains a universe that is unknowable for humankind. We are afraid of what lurks in the night because anything could be out there in the darkness. And this is what is so fucking terrifying about Hereditary 2. We just don't know what happens to our souls when we die. We can't know, and we'll never truly know if our decisions are our own, or if some higher power is manipulating us like marionettes on a string. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. I've been wanting to make this episode for forever. Thank you to my crew on Patreon for enabling me to make these overly long and overly complicated videos about obscure topics that no one could possibly care about. If you'd like to see more content like this, the best way you can help me out is to go check out my Patreon page or click subscribe, click like here on this video. Also, you can go check out my Discord server, which should be up and running by now. So this is briankrock saying oeuvre and out.